Kosher Day, a very special program organized by ACRI, Association of Chabad Rabonim of Illinois. Thank you very much to Rabbi Posner, Rabbi Hertz, and Rabbi Moskowitz for putting together this extremely important event and bringing special guests, experts on kashrus, Rabbi Beryl Bell, Rav of Anash in Montreal, Diane on the Bezdin, and special guest Rabbi Shalom Fishbane, kashrus administrator at CRC, and the head of the AKC organization. Today we're going to learn, refresh, educate ourselves on many of the aspects of kashrus that are often overlooked. It's very good to remind ourselves, especially in today's environment with the new industries and kashrus production. It's a great opportunity to get together and really learn about what it is that we have to know and keep in mind. I'd like to ask everyone to please turn off your cell phones. And I introduce Rabbi Yosef Posner of Palishbach Skokie, Association of Chabad Rabonim of Illinois, followed by Rabbi Baruch Hertz.
Hello, thank you everyone for coming. I'm here just to very briefly explain who ACRI is. About 20 years ago, some of us noticed that the Anash community had grown quite large and also sort of splintered a little bit in different communities, different neighborhoods, and realized that we needed to accomplish several things actually. One was to see to it that that as we have more Chabad houses opening and more shluchim who are all functioning as rabbis and didn't necessarily spend lots of time training in yeshiva for some of the rabbinical duties, to help get ourselves up to speed, to know what's the proper way to make a chasana, the proper way to do a funeral, and so on and so forth. So to help us be better Rabbanim, to better serve the community which was growing. Until then, Rabbi Shusterman was the Rav of the community, but a person only has 24 hours in a day. It was difficult for everybody to field all kinds of questions from all over. And also to have sort of like a united front for what Chabad stands for in certain of these areas. People say Chabad custom is this, Chabad does that, and try to have all of us more or less on the same page. So Rabbi Hertz and I met with Rabbi Shusterman, who was very enthusiastic about this idea of forming an organization, of getting all the shluchim who are functioning as Rabbanim to organize ourselves and to work in these areas. We, over the course of time, we did a number of these things, but some things which are much more behind the scenes are just sort of like continuing education for shluchim, where we brought in Rabbanim from out of town, or local Rabbanim ourselves, in terms of things which Rabbanim need to know. There were many things which we did for the community, which were public things. For example, if anyone remembers the big Shetel crisis, I think the first rabbinic organization in the world which came out with a clear statement of what to do was ACRI. We had no intention of ever going beyond the very narrow boundaries of the Chicago area, but with the internet, we gave local advice, and somehow that became the trendsetter around the world. We published things such as guidance for what to do about interrupting the middle of davening, which made its way into the back cover of the annotated siddur. Those Chabad houses which don't clean up under the covering of the Shulchan Kriya probably still have to this day guidance of what to do if there's a mistake during Kriya Satayra. We wrote a halachas for that. Halachas of Yichud, various useful guides. We dealt with funeral directors and trying to explain to them what our expectations are in case of Le'aleinu, that's necessary. One of the things we did as well, of course, was in the area of kashrus, where we tried to, there's all kinds of hechsherim out there, all kinds of standards. We eat this, we don't eat that, we do the other thing, to try to give some kind of semblance of a common practice that we should more or less be in this area, and this is how to go about it. These are the questions, these are the issues. Here's specific products, and so on, which are a problem, which are not a problem. And we actually published a list of explanation of what these issues are and recommendations back in 17 years ago. We decided it was time to renew that, update it, and that's one of the reasons why we're here today. Later on, we will go a little more into detail in it, and we'll give out a booklet of general guidelines as well as updated list of recommendations. Another thing we'll be giving out later actually is a little folder like this, which basically lets you know resources, halachic resources locally, if you have any kind of shaila in any area, who you can turn to. Primarily, every person has their own rav, whether it's where you daven or whatever. But sometimes it's a question which either whoever you normally call is not answering the phone, or it's a question which is a little off the beaten path. So we have the resources available for you, and we'll be giving this out later as well. And without any further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Rabbi Hertz.
I think the big Yashakayach, where he goes to Rabbi Posner, who has his own shlichus in Skokie, but has made ACRI a big priority and is always available for, even if it takes extensive hours, for anything needed in this regard. We owe him a big thank you for that. I also want to thank Rabbi Markowitz, my partner who worked together, who really helped put this event together. Thank you very much. For all the many things he does for the community, and thank you, Rabbi Nottig, Rabbi Levi Nottig, and Rabbi Shmuel Nottig, hosting this event. I also want to just acknowledge Rabbi Stern helped the flyer, the Rabbi Grossman, and a babysitting service, which is also in the next room. If anyone needs to take advantage of it, we have. Thank you also for that. We're sitting here with an olam, with a crowd. We don't have to explain the importance of kashrus. Kashrus, everybody in the Chabad world understands it. Just open up the Igros Kodesh, the letters from the Rebbe. You'll see letter after letter stating how it affects body, soul. The Rebbe talks about young children not feeding them even questionable kashrus when it comes to Chol Yisrael and to all products. In general, the urgency of kashrus. There are people in this community who had answers as well as around the world from the Rebbe. When they wrote about specific issues, they asked the Rebbe, and the Rebbe told them kashrus, shmira. One of the main answers was kashrus, machila, shtia. And as you know, in a Jewish home and in a Chassidish home, the kitchen's the main room. What goes in the body, what's part of our life. That is the foundation, really, of a family in the halachic world of kashrus. So we're not here to explain the importance. We're here just to give information and make it available. I just want to say, in that vein, I want to first, as we welcome Rabbi Bell, who came from out of town. It's not easy to come. Rabbi Bell's a busy Rav and busy in many roles, and really to make time to be here for Chicago. We really appreciate Rabbi Bell coming here. ACRI is, I'm not just adding what ACRI, I just want to say is even though it's run primarily by most of the members are shluchim, it's a separate association to deal with halachic things. At the same time, it works hand in hand together with Rabbi Meir Shimon Moskowitz and Chabad Illinois, the head shliach of Illinois, Moskowitz, who is dedicated also, we do everything together, the Lev and Nefesh, trying to bring more service to the community. People ask of what's our role in kashrus. I just want to say as follows. Over the years, sometimes we had questions. We want to give a hechsher for this or for that. I want to make it clear that both myself and Posner, we never ever dealt with hechsherim. There's one official hechsher here in Chicago, which we support, all of us. Rabbi Daniel Moskowitz was very involved in CRC. CRC is an invaluable service. It really, every restaurant in town is really under the CRC. Every simcha, every institution, it's a very special service. The point, but it's not only just a special service. I am personally, as well as some other, sit in the Kashrus Commission of CRC, and I can tell you it's a beautiful ma'aseh. In the Kashrus world, we hear a lot about people use the word as politics or different things. CRC has one mission involved to bring kashrus to the community, very ethical, mentioned ma'aseh, and it really, if you only know the care and concern of all the establishments. This is not where, even though CRC is a world-acclaimed ma'aseh, it has factories and establishments all over the world, literally, I'm saying, not only in America, all over the world, and Rav Fishman at its helm, but the thing is, locally, it's partially here to service the community. So I want to give a special thank you to CRC for this, and also for our Kehillah also, that people, we call the whole day with questions. You always call with a shaila, this product, that product, this medication, that thing, the next thing, and CRC is always there to answer. And it's a very special service, which not many communities can boast this. Thank you. At the same time, I want to explain that the CRC is catering to a broader community. And we have specific needs. And meaning need as follows. We're makpid by us, the idea of Pas Yisrael, Bishul Yisrael, Chol Yisrael, these things, as well as other standards. Just use an example, is Chok V'la Yavro, which means it's not even an option, and to us it's not even an option to even Chol Yisrael. The Kalim is not an option. So that's why it's important that we as ACRI have together with CRC created standards which is beneficial for our community. But that's the combination and the relationship is very special, and it's and with that I want to introduce Rav Fishbane, who is a world-renowned authority in kashrus, and I'm saying this sometimes use the word flippantly, but it's real here. In this case, he's a few. He runs ACO, and he's respected by the whole kashrus world. And it's really a pleasure to have him here today. And thank you for the whole CRC, for the kashrus of the community. And without any further ado, Rabbi Fishman.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. The talk is a pleasure for us. Sitting at the Kashrus Commission, which I'll explain a little bit more. This is the engine that drives the CRC and the decision making. And having people like Rabbi Hertz or Rabbi Posner on the commission is a great benefit. And if you never give that up, I can't thank you enough for that. It's besides keeping us in check, but for lack of a better word, real Yiras Shamayim. And that is the source of doing kashrus the way it's supposed to be done, like the Rebbeinu Shem wants. In the Torah, whenever you want to know the yesod of anything, you look for the first place where the Torah mentions it, and that's the yesod for the rest of the world. And the very first mitzvah, the very first dibur that Hashem ever spoke to man is kashrus. Kadosh Baruch Hu told Adam HaRishon what he can and cannot eat. It's not insignificant for that. So we spend our days with that in mind. Dibur, kashrus, Even something like, I picked up a Snapple cover, number 53. Was steak and Snapple, that an average woman consumes 6 pounds of lipstick in her lifetime. Okay? So right away, okay, what's in lipstick? So I can tell you, there's pearl essence, which comes from the shine of a herring scale, and et cetera, et cetera. So now we'll get into halacha and shilas. That's for the Rabbonim here. But everything we look at, and that's why, by the way, for Pesach, we're much more machmir even on lipstick, as opposed to during the year, which is not meiti. But this is the yusoid, and this is what we live by. So I have a fantastic job, but I also have a stressful job, and I'm not complaining. And that is because the CRC does something very unique. And again, it comes from the fact that we're a community-based hashgacha. There are over 1,500 hashgachas in the world right now. The CRC Baruch Hashem is on the top 5. I'm talking about numbers and et cetera. The ones that run the CRC is the Kashrus Commission, and they're very much focused on decisions have to be made on what is best, not for business, not for politics, what is best for the person going shopping. You have to think of that's the number one decider. So one of the things we do is we do something which causes me great stress, grief, little satisfaction, but it's important, is we put out an approved list of hashgachas that we've researched extensively and are willing to share. And we made it into cards. I put some out when you come in for your taking. It's a popular app. And I have to tell you, this is an astonishing number. Out of the 1,500 hashgachas, under 250 meet our standards, which means we allow their ingredients into our system, but we tell others. The mila is, I must tell you, we have a long, long list of hashgachas throughout the world that are waiting for us to go review them with just the goal of being on the CRC list. I can't, it's not part of the agenda, and it's not part of what the CRC is asking us to do. But I can tell you countless of hashgachas that Baruch Hashem have increased their standards. We go, we'll do a review, we'll charge them for the expenses maybe, we'll give them a long list of tikkunim, we'll come back in 6 months. If they're there, then they can get back on the list, and they're always worried about being taken off. That's a fantastic side benefit, which most probably no one knows about, that we here in Chicago are literally changing kashrus throughout the world. So running a hashgacha, you always look at halacha and you look at chumras. Both of them are important. Obviously, halacha is the base and chumras move on. For some people, chumras are the halacha. So what I need to do as administrator is to try to make policies that are shavah l'chol nefesh. So there are different rabbonim in town that I'll check with. We want to do the following. What do you think about it? Many times we'll decide not to do it because it's not shavah l'chol nefesh. I can't do everything all the time. It's a large community, and not everybody has a thing. But these are the things that guide us. There are times when keeping a chumrah be'etzem helps even on halacha. I'll give you one example. There's something called a DA cow. What's a DA cow? What happens is, this is b'chlal, we can spend hours just talking about the meat industry. But what happens is today, everybody needs things quickly. That's the American way. We want it quickly, we want it geschmack. So whether that means we want our steaks nice and marbled, so they start corn feeding all these cows or steer to get a nice marbled steak, which gives you a geschmack steak, but it also takes the level of coming out as kosher, dropping from 80% down to 35%, which is why kosher meat costs so much. When 80% of your meat leaving the shlachtos is not labeled as kosher. But why is it? Because it's corn fed. It's not for today. But another aspect is getting milk all the time. So what they do is they feed the cows this type of grass that grows quickly and produces good milk, and the farmers are happy with that. The problem with that is this type of grass causes a lot of internal gas, to the point, and I'm not making this up, you could have an exploding cow. It's that dangerous. Yes, if you're driving down Iowa and all of a sudden a piece of steak flies into your window sill, you'll know where that's from, the exploding cow. But the farmers are careful about this. So what they do is very simple. They take a needle and they'll stick it into the stomach, let out the gas, and the cow couldn't, it's not going to explode. In South America and these places, they just they walk around with a needle and just start poking cows. In America, at least they put on white gloves, they put on a smock, they pretend to be a doctor, and it's a little better. The point is, the halacha is that if you make a hole in the stomach, it's a treifa. So, and anything that comes out of a treifa is treifa. So in essence, it's not kosher. So how do we give hefsher on milk like that? So there's all types of heterim, and it's not so pashut. I'm not going to get into the heter because almost everyone here I think keeps Chol Yisrael, but I want to point out this point. Any farm that is a Chol Yisrael farm, the very first thing we do when we give out Chol Yisrael is we go into the computer system of every cow. Every cow has a chip on its ear, an electronic chip that lets them know how many times it gets milked and all that, including if it ever had the DA surgery on its stomach. We completely take them out of the herd. So what I'm saying is, for sometimes the chumras of, let's say, even Chol Yisrael is actually much greater. It's not just the chumrah. You're avoiding possible tarfis. You don't have to come on to a bittul and a chanan. There's many, many examples of those. So that's how it's here in Chicago. That's how I have to share with you something I heard from one of our restaurant owners, Mikhail at Avida's. He told me such a great story that it's kedai to share. That's a chumrah. He says that Rav Yosef came once to Argentina, where he's from, and the people came over to Rav and asked him, we suffer from a lot of poverty, a lot of anius here, and what can the Rav tell us? Well, Rav, what can the Chacham tell us? So he says, because by the Svardish halachas, most of the time, they don't end up benching after eating tortillas, this and that. They put in a little apple juice, whatever they do, everything's a mezayis for them. So he says, you're going away from what we'll call a chumrah, but listen, how can the Rebbeinu Shalom shower on you blessing if you're not saying the full Birchas Hamazon blessing the Rebbeinu Shalom? And he says, ever since then, no more kulas with benching. We want our parnasa from the Rebbeinu Shalom, and we'll do the full benching. So, like Rabbi Hertz said, it takes a lot for us to go ahead and do good kashrus here. I'll tell you somewhat of unknown. We lose a lot of money, on giving a typical hefsher on a restaurant here. It takes at least 5+ people just to do it right. We have an expert in insects and taloyim. We have all types of people just to make one place, but we do it for the community. Nachazach. One of the things we're trying very hard is to get every one of our places to be Pas Yisrael. It's very difficult here in Chicago because simply the types of breads that they need for like hamburger buns and these things, it's just not available. And for them to get from the local bakery, it also doesn't work. Forget about the halacha shabbai, but that's what we're trying to do. We've gone to count. We just got a new account in Minnesota, as an example. They make the hamburger buns for all of McDonald's. Not only is it kosher, it's pas Yisrael. I'm not saying you should go to McDonald's. I'm just letting you know it happens to be an interesting fact. So it was exciting to us. We ran to this guy and said, maybe you can distribute to our local restaurants, because it seems that the hard parts are these slider buns, these hamburger buns, the regular buns, things that we try to work it out. We even went to local places. But I have to just tell you, the commission, the ACRI Kosher Commission, authorized us to spend thousands of dollars, and it's still on the table, to convince a bakery that's not under the CRC, just to let us come on. You're under another hashgacha, they're not interested, or for whatever reason to make it pas Yisrael. We'll pay for it. It's thousands of dollars. And I've gone to 2 or 3 large factory bakeries here in Chicago, or in this area, and I've gotten a no. I happen to be, there's a slimmer of hope right now. I spoke again to somebody else, and he's supposed to get back to me tomorrow to see if we can implement it again at our cost and our cost only. This is not a moneymaker, it's not even our account, but again, this is what we do for the community. So having said that, as an introduction to our involvement, I'd like to focus on a couple of actual kosher things, with your permission, and of course take any questions you may have. We'll start with medicines. Medicines, vitamins are very common questions by us. My goal here is not to paskin anything. You have very Chabad Rabonim. I'll just give you somewhat of the background of some of the shilas, even to know what they ask and how we look at it. So there are basically 4 questions you always look at, whether you're going to ask your own pharmacist, your own doctor, or when you ask the shilah to your Rav, what they ask about, that will help you decide if you can take this medicine, the vitamin, or anything like that. Number 1, is this OTC, which stands for over-the-counter medication, contain any kosher sensitive ingredients, which I'll tell you some of them. Number 2, is there an alternative that is kosher? Number 3 is how edible is it? And number 4 is how sick is the person that needs it? So in the ingredients of the OTC of medicine, almost all of the time, the actual medicinal part of it is always kosher. That's not the problem. But you can't take it, your body won't ingest it. So they have to make it in a way where it's a binder, all types of things to make it actual ingestible. So there are things like aspartame and citrates and ethyl alcohol, flavors, lactose, polysorbate, all of these things could be a problem. The primary ingredient that's the most problematic is definitely glycerin. Glycerin is a sweet fat. That's basically what it is. And you can either get it from animals or you can get it from vegetables. 50% at least of the glycerin in the world is definitely from animals. And the thing with glycerin is once you change it from the fat to the glycerin, it's a chemical, we're not here for chemistry today, but you can never trace back to the source. Once you change the chemical into the glycerin, you can never find out if it came from vegetable or from animal. And therefore, it's when you have 50% in the world market, and the animal glycerin is much cheaper. It's real trade. I'm talking about from pigs, from cows that were geschachten. And the industry that uses it the most is the medicine industry, or the toothpaste industry, or the mouthwash industry. Because maybe some people might have a concern, certainly the Muslims drive a lot of, we'll call it the religious, conscientious decisions that companies make, but they're not, for some reason, they're not concerned about these other things, while we might be. So while companies might go to the vegetable-based glycerin in many items, when it comes to medicines and mouthwash and all of these things, they're much less concerned. Okay, so that's benegay glycerin. You have to find out. The other things are whether I said before is like if it's edible. There are 3 examples of how we look if it's edible. Certainly if it's a chewable pill, a cough drop, a glucose drink, a liquid medicine, that is what we consider edible. Then there's something called shaloi kederech achila, which is like a capsule, a gelatin cap. And finally, the inedible will be something like a tablet, a pill or something like that. That usually doesn't happen. And then finally, as I said, there's the dangers of what's considered how sick is a person. If a person is dehydrating and that's a sakana, mamish, they shouldn't worry about maybe there's something, just take it. You know, your life, the chayva, and the Torah wants us to live in order to do more mitzvahs. Then there's a choilish einboy sakana, they're extreme pain to the point that they can't function, where you can violate most isurei d'Rabbanan, not the araisas. And then there's the common headache, the uncomfortable or general hygiene, like the mouthwash and all those. And those generally, we say, any halacha, whether it's the araisa, the rabbanan, any yisur, you can't be over. So these are the general points, and you want to find out beforehand, and we don't have time now, but certainly the question about toothpaste and the question about mouthwash is fascinating. You know, Moldik at Seitan, toothpaste consisted of one of 2 things. I'm talking about way back, you know, Gemara at Seitan. Crushed hooves of an animal was one way. I don't know who thought of that. And the other one was eggshells. Basically, you need the abrasive. And the real question boils down to, as the world, you know, got further and more important, people just didn't like the crushed eggshell, and it wouldn't come out of the toothpaste dispenser well. So they started adding things to make it a little bit more matin. So that's where glycerin, which again is a sweet fat, was introduced. And the real question comes down to, again, you'll ask your own paisik, is toothpaste considered something that's edible? The 2 shitas are. Edible is something that you swallow, and it's made that if you swallow, it tastes decent, which would be toothpaste. And the other side is, something edible is what you would serve your guests. Unless you're in camp, no one's serving anyone a bottle of toothpaste or something like that. So those are the 2 shilas in halacha. Again, you can ask your own paisik, but if someone, just as a tip, when I go shopping for toothpaste, there are several toothpastes that don't have glycerin at all. You just look at the thing, look for the word glycerin. Or if they're at the very end and not in the beginning, then it's usually going to be bottled. If it's in the beginning, it's not bottled. So those are some guidelines. Okay. I'd like to, I don't know, can you hear me or I don't need to? All right. I'd like to now talk a little bit about buying meat and chicken and what the shilas could be if it comes in with a good hechsher. So the Mitzvah says that if you've ever been in a shlacht house, let's talk about chickens for a moment. There are tremendous amounts of chickens being shechted per hour in the 50,000 to 100,000 range. Okay? Depending on how many shaykhs are on it. It's huge. It's huge. And once they're shechted, they're going down a line, and you have mashkichim standing there, and they're looking at each thing. They're looking at the tzumas agidin, which is the foot, and they're looking at the kishkas to see. And it's a massive operation, but it goes very quickly. Now, one of the things the mashkichim are looking for is to see if not only was the geshachten good, but if anything happened on the way in. You know, they put them in these crates. Sometimes they get a little agitated, and they'll flap around, and they can actually break a bone, and they can break the bone to the point that the animal's not kosher. And these go by very quickly, and the mashkichim are trying to find it, but they don't always catch it. Either is because it's too fast, or most of the time they can't see it. It's inside. We haven't created. If anybody wants to make a lot of money, here's an idea. Create an X-ray machine that you can see what's going on inside the animal. Besides for this, but more important, remember I said before that we're only at 35% kosher because of the fast-growing animals that we're doing today with cornbread, and therefore it gets a lot of lesions and pneumonia on their lungs. So if you can pass them all through an X-ray machine and see that the lungs are clean, what we call chalak, and you'll have a 100% rate, I'd like to invest in that, please. So what happens is that if the animal breaks a bone beforehand, so now you're cleaning your chicken, and you see it's bloody. What's the halacha? The halacha is clearly that if it broke a bone beforehand and it got bloody or bruised, the chicken is not kosher. That's the halacha. So now what? It's Erev Shabbos. Maybe it's on Shabbos already, and you see something. So what do? I'll give you some basic guidelines, and of course, the Moldig Zeiten, when the housewife would be coming to the Rav with a chicken in hand. I think those days are over. I could ask the Rabbanim. At least I haven't seen it much, but it doesn't mean the question has gone away. So here's the mitzias. Most of the time, when the bone was broken before the shechita, you'll get a broken bone and a nice big bruise. That's when it's not kosher. But there are many times that it will break the bone after the shechita, because it flaps around and it does bang and it gets hung up. If it breaks the bone after the shechita, it is kosher, because it's already geshachta. So how do you know the difference? You basically know the difference of how bruised it is. If it's a broken bone with very little bruising, you could assume that it happened after the shechita and it's fine. If it's a broken bone beforehand, with a lot of bruising, then it's a problem and you shouldn't eat it. The good news is, by the way, if you buy a tray of chickens and you find one that's a problem, you can still eat the other pieces, like the quarters, on the tray. Because this chicken never met this chicken in its life until they got together at Jewel on the market, on the shelf. Okay? Likewise, they don't do that much anymore. But let's say you find they put in, let's say, the liver in a bag into the turkeys or whatnot, and you find the problem with the turkey. It doesn't mean that liver belongs to that turkey. You can eat the liver or vice versa. I got to tell you a great story from my youth. I used to live on Christiana Street, 5732. Around the corner from us on Ardmore was a barn salvation. So the fishbone tradition is that we always have turkey for Shabbos Chanukah. For the primary reason is right after Thanksgiving and turkey's on sale. Right? So we had our Shabbos night, Shabbos Chanukah turkeys. And despite that my mother had looked in to find the liver in a bag that wasn't gekasher, she found it while we were cutting it at the table. And the halacha is, ein shishim kineged hakaved, and which means you don't have 60 of the meat versus, and the chayr it's not kosher. So what did we do? We went around the corner to Rav Aaron Salvation and asked him the shiloh. So this is just a great, you have to imagine the scenario. We're sitting with the barn, pulling out Sfarim, declaring this, a good brisker Hakira. And then you hear from the kitchen, the Rebbitzin says, "Did you put any stuffing in it?" So we said, "Yeah, it's kosher." And she's right. Ain't shishim keneged hakaved is literal, but if you have anything else in the pot, it makes it batel b'shishim. So we're able to enjoy our turkey. A couple of other points. Sometimes you'll find like chicken legs on the top are a pinkish color, like by the narrow end. That is very common. Even if the bone is broken, that means it happened after the shechita, and it's okay. Now, how about you find a big bruise? This is common, but you don't see anything broken. This you find often. What that is that the bruise happened, and it's after the shechita. So the chicken itself, the chicken al lein is kosher, but I have to tell you, dam is still not kosher. You can't eat blood. And when it's very bruised, this is called in the industry bloodshot. You find it a lot by meat. Sometimes you find little specks of meat. That's bloodshot. You can assume that the melicha that was done on the chicken did not do a good enough job to take out the dam. So you cannot eat that big bruise, even if the chicken itself is kosher. So what you will find is, if a mashgiach in the factory saw it, and you find a little bit of a slit on top of that bruise, let's say it's the chicken and the slit opens the skin, so that means the mashgiach chopped it, and he made the slit in order for the melicha, the salt, to go in and extract the dam, and then it's okay. But if you see it in a way where it wasn't caught, then in order for it to eat the chicken, you actually do need to cut out the bruise of blood, the congealed blood. And sometimes we get calls that I found, there's just this red juice coming out of my meat even after I broiled it. What is that? That's what we call in the industry sear, not in the industry, the Gemara, and that's perfectly okay. All right. Let's talk for a few minutes about bugs, and then I'll give it over to our other Kosher Rabonim. So bugs is a big problem. It seems to be a battle we can't win. The bugs are getting smarter. The government is doing less pesticides, and it is one of those things. I mean, we at the CRC, again, this is there's no income for such a person. There's no revenue coming in. It's complete dedication for kashrus. We hired someone just to think about bugs all day. He calls himself the CRC exterminator. Okay? He's a Choshever Rav in town. He actually just was appointed Rav by one of the shuls, Rabbi Langer. And what it means to think about bugs is not just that he goes into our restaurants and takes already checked produce from our mashgiach and rechecks it to make sure he's doing a good job and trains the mashgiach. But he thinks about weather patterns and fields. And if the weather's going to be dry in California, that means there's going to be an infestation problem. This is worldwide. All of these things come into play to do bugs. And that's all he does is think about bugs. And again, that's the best way to do it. When you give somebody a lot of jobs, they'll be able to do, if you give someone 10 jobs and he can only do each one of them maybe 70%. If you give him 5 jobs, he can do all of them at 100%. And that's the thinking of hiring such a person. So I can't sit here all now and tell you all the different vegetables and all the different things. The big shiloh in all of bugs is what is called a bug. The Torah itself allows certain bugs. Or, if let's say, like the raisin shiloh is a big shiloh. Again, I'm not positive. I'm saying that there are times when the bug is born and dies on the fruit and never moves. That's not called a bug, even though it looks like a bug. Another big example was the anisakis worm in the salmon. When we go up to, the CRC has many plants in Alaska. And I get to go there. I guess it's good to be lost once in a while. And it's one of the most beautiful places in the world, in Alaska. And it's an amazing place because they almost live in a time warp. We're busy here talking about North Korea and Trump, and you turn on the news and everything that's going on in our world over there. Who's Trump? The only thing they're worried about is are the salmon biting, and are there too many beers today? And it's great. It's a time warp. And it's actually something very interesting going on now, and that is there's this new item called a frankenfish. You know what a frankenfish? A frankenfish is an industry term. It's not the real word. Where basically it takes salmon 2.5 years to grow to size in order for it to be to resale. That's a lot of time, and it's also up in cold waters. It's not efficient for business. So they created a new type of salmon. It looks like a salmon, it swims like a salmon, and it quacks like a duck. No, it doesn't. But it's a piece of salmon. What makes this salmon grow in only 14 months, and it could be grown here in Maine and in Pennsylvania, is that they played with the DNA, and they introduced to the DNA of an eel. Eel, E-E-L, not kosher. Now, this has taken over the salmon industry. because now salmon can be much more affordable. What is the halacha about such a thing? Not for today's discussion. Maybe if you invite me back, we'll go through halacha, go through all. But it's very interesting. Why am I bringing this out? Is that although it's an American company and it's being grown here and all of that, it has not been allowed yet to be sold in the United States. Only it's now being sold only in Canada. I apologize, everybody else. Because of the governor in Alaska is putting up a big fight in Congress not to allow it to be called salmon. That's the way these industries work. You know, the dairy industry, the soy milk. You know how long it took our government officials to allow it to be called milk and not soy juice? These are things that actually affect kashrut. So the point is that when it came to the worms in the Anisakis worms in salmon, it's a big shay on halacha. But if you look in the Gemara Chulin, the Gemara says that the Tana was telling his mother that when you prepare for me, I think it was Reb Yochanan, when you prepare for me the fish and you see the worms, do me a favor, put some garnish on top so I don't see the worms when I eat it. This is a Gemara. He doesn't say throw it out because it's treif. He says I can't eat it because nimasli, as they say in Israel, ichsa, right? So what does that tell you? That there are times where bugs and worms are mutter to eat because they don't have it in toilas. I'll end with one other point of bugs. Again, it's not the purpose today to go through all the vegetables and what does and does not have bugs. We have a great app, we have a great website, it's always been but the type of things that come up. So, not so long ago, someone with a lot of time decided to start straining oranges. How many bugs do you think are in oranges? A surprisingly high amount of scale bugs. Those are those little dots that live on oranges that you don't really see in jewel, but that's because they clean those up. But the stuff that they use for orange juice, if you go to Israel, you see those orange juice makers, you see it full of black dots. And they did continuous tests, and they found that in a typical carton of Tropicana, over and over was getting about 6 to 10 bugs per carton. The other ones, not the Tropicanas, the other companies were getting much less, maybe 4, average of 4. Still a lot. That became a big problem because these are bugs. Obviously, we don't eat bugs, and I could leave you with that. Wouldn't be fair just to sit down now. But basically, it boiled down to figuring out the types of bugs they are. And here's the main akuda. The way the Rebbeinu Shalom created these bugs that live on produce is the Rebbeinu Shalom gave them something called a rostrum. A rostrum is pretty much a very long nose that's able to connect itself into the produce and latch on and extract the nutrients. And it's made in a way that it can withstand anything that a wind, a hurricane, and it's stuck there. And that's why we can't get the bugs off. And I have to point something out. We have tried in kashrus all types of ways to mass, to do it in a way where we can do it in a big scale where all the bugs get off. Rabbi Gissinger likes to say, he's one of the leaders in bug research, that they even put a room full of produce, infested produce, and they turned on the laughing gas that you get at the dentist. They thought maybe the bugs would flow off that way. What happened was the bugs were swirling around but still attached to the produce. They're a ganz mishenichna sadr, you know what I'm saying? They couldn't get them off. I can tell you what doesn't work. You know what does not work? Salt water. There's a misconception that if you put in salt water and you soak the produce in salt water, that will take it off. That will not take it off. We've done the research, and I challenge anyone, bring us the stuff that you did with salt water, we'll find you the bugs. The only thing that works is a surfactant, slippery, soap, vegetable wash that's slippery. That's the only thing that works. So Lamushal, Michael Kirshner sells every week produce that he goes down to the company and he makes, chopped romaine and spinach, all these things. What does he do there? We're putting in surfactant into the machines. The people think we're crazy over there. But that's the only thing that takes bugs off. So finally, back to our little bug here in the oranges. Basically what happens is we found that most of the time that the bugs that are found in the oranges, they lost their nose. Okay, bad for them, good for us. And therefore, they're no longer a barrier. They're no longer a complete bug, which makes it halakhically acceptable. There's a lot more to say on this, but I've taken up my time. Thank you for listening.
After Rabbi Bell speaks, we'll take questions both for Rabbi Bell and Rabbi Fishbein. I just want to say, I want to just acknowledge also, thank you Rabbi Fishbein for the beautiful talk and for all that you do. I want to acknowledge that this week, one of the big leaders in world kosher has passed away, Rabbi Chaim Goldzweig, and those who, we remember him very fondly in Chicago. First of all, he was in world kashrus, he set up a lot of the industry today is a schusai, but in Chicago, why we have a special kashrus in the city, Rabbi Goldzweig deserves a lot of credit. He was the leader, and the Shamash and Aliyah, many times we had events where Rabbi Goldzweig would speak and take questions and answers, and his chus should continue in our city. We thank also, we see it's a demonstration both for our speakers and also for the importance of kashrus, that the community came out today on there's many things to do on a day off, like 4th of July. Personally for me, where I grew up, it was more of a sad day, but it's special that people really have given their time, and as I said again, the speakers will answer questions, both general questions and questions you have on kashrus. It's a big schus and pleasure to have Rabbi Bell. Rabbi Bell is sought out all over the world, and he's also both the combination of both a very chashuv Rav, the Rav of the Montreal community of Anash, but also a speaker and also in the kashrus world. Rabbi Bell actually came back from New York from a whole week then and agreed to come. It wasn't easy. The flight got canceled last night, and many other things. And him to join us this time is special. Thank you, Rabbi Bell, and any further introduction.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Hertz, for that effusive introduction. It's a great pleasure to be here, and I see it's a wonderful turnout. It's a pleasure to visit. I have family here in Chicago, and it's always nice to see Rabbi Fishbein. I hope to meet his colleagues. You're very fortunate here in many ways, from all Anash communities. Montreal is a large Anash community. It's the oldest Anash community outside of New York. But Chicago is known. It was Bikur Chicago that this was in the running for Friedrich Rebbe came to America in terms of where he would settle. But the organization of the community over here, and the fact you have a Rav, Rabonim, very impressive list of resources that you have over here, that you have people locally to ask questions to. It's very vital because local conditions. Chabad al-Asar Levarer, every place has its own particular circumstances, and you're fortunate you have people here to ask, and therefore, obviously, I won't be referring to the local conditions, speaking about general inyanim and kashrus and general standards. Before I came here, I was teaching in the Catskills, the Ivy League Torah study program, and one of the things I teach the students there is about kashrus. And when I told them about resources, they're asking, what tachsherim can I rely on, and how do you know if something's kosher, and so on and so forth. I said, listen, the best resource there is you have an app from the CRC, and it's always being updated, and this is the fact. This is not something which people that know me know that I'm not the sort of person that gives praise to curry favor by people. It never works anyway. The fact is that I'm not sure if Rabbi Fishbein looks at himself like that, but certainly the rest of the kashrus industry does. This is a place where there is a leadership in terms of raising the general standards of kashrus throughout the world, and you're very, very fortunate to have such resources within your reach. When it comes to Chabad, something I just like to give as a general introduction. It has to do not only with kashrus, but many inyanim. And many people look at Chabad, people that are not in Chabad, which that doesn't really bother me. It's people within Chabad, they look at it the same way. They said that Chabad, we're very, very accepting, and we're very open-minded, and we're very, very loose, and if there's a kula, we have to be makar of people, we have to bring people close. And the Rebbe would always say, means you have to be a karvan l'teira, not to be a makar of the teira to them. But still, if there's b'chalukadeyas, a head, and people say, why are you being this person's not the Shem Shabbos, how are you being mitzaref and taminyan? So, ma'isa with this heter and that heter, what's called b'farhesia, and mezuch teira. So the fact is that it's absolutely the opposite, and in almost, remember the Rebbe was accused of being a Zionist, that he said Zionism. So the Rebbe was more anti-Zionist than the Satmar is. Elamai, that we also have a mitzvah, we have to l'reach kamecha. And how do you balance these various considerations? And so too, we have a mitzvah d'oraisa, we have to l'reach kamecha. So therefore, what? You should go kick the guy out of your minion, and you're going to use a kula if you have to l'reach kamecha because you want to have a chumrah. In this, who says the chumrah is here and the kula is there? So when it comes to kashrus too, so what's your chumrah? You're going to say that a person's ready to become kosher, then they're not ready to keep cholav Yisrael. So should you kasher the kitchen and let them continue to eat chazer, and that's going to be your chumrah? And that's, as Rabbi Fishbein said before, every kashrus organization, and the MK in Montreal is also, it's a community organization. You have to address the needs of your particular community. But the perspective of how it is that we look at things and how it is we look at the standard of Chabad, in general, if you look, and this is the shita you see in all the Rebbe Sichas and the Rebbe's letters, the Rebbe would always look to be Makayim all the days. We're coming now to we're now in the 3 weeks when the Rebbe would speak about in Yonim what's mutter during the 9 days, and Erev Tisha B'Av Shchol B'Shabbos, Tisha B'Av Shchol B'Shabbos, what's mutter, what's not mutter, and the Rebbe would always look for a way to be Makayim, Machlekes Achreinim, what you're allowed to do, would always look for something that's Makayim Choladeis, because why do you need to go into Machlekes if you could avoid it? If you could fulfill all the opinions, that is the derech of the Rebbe, and that is the derech of Chabad. And the Rebbe would say, I remember being by Fabrengens, the Rebbe would speak, and at the end of the Sikha, and he said, and the reason why this is something which is mutter even to learn on Tisha B'Av is, and he explained why it is, that don't use this as a proof on Paskan Machlekes about whether you're allowed to learn in such a kviyas. And that's a general inyan. So too, when it comes to, it's not pshat that we're being mekel in the inyan for Cholav Yisrael by kashering somebody's kitchen. Is we're being machmer and kashrus, and the person is not yet ready for it. And therefore, when it's coming to ourselves and our own homes, so this is not a place where, in general, Chabad is looking for kulas in anything in Allah, and especially in Yana Kashrus. So Rabbi Hertz mentioned before a number of letters from the Rebbe. So I just mentioned 2 letters. One letter a person wrote into the Rebbe that he was in Eretz Yisrael, and he was not in a frum community, and he could be in one of 2 places. One place he was able to keep kosher, eat kosher for Shabbos, but not able to keep Shabbos. The other place he could keep Shabbos, but there was no kosher food. Which one should he go to? So, oh, the beautiful letter that I was explaining, the Mile of Shabbos and the importance of Shabbos. And then he goes, on the other hand, look at the Mile of Kashrus and the importance of Kashrus. And therefore concludes that there must be a way, since those things are so important, and Hashem demands them from all of us, there must be a way you could find another place. And you'd be able to be Makayim both of them. And there was another one, I think maybe this is the letter Rabbi Hertz was referring to, about a shayla was given. It happens to be that there was a young girl, and it happens to be in Montreal. I know her, I know the family. She's already a grandmother, could be even a great-grandmother by now, from the time that letter was written. And it wasn't a question of kashrus, it was a question of a certain hiddur that the family hadn't kashrus. And the girl didn't have a good appetite, and one of the things she liked to eat was this food. And to get that food, they would have to be mavater to give up a certain hiddur they had in the mishpacha. Over all the other Lubavitcher families in the city, just to mention to you, a certain hiddur that they had. And the Rebbe answered that even though, on the one hand, you're not talking about whether it's kosher or not kosher. That's first of all. Number two, you're not talking about that she's not healthy. She's healthy, Baruch Hashem, she's healthy, but she doesn't have such a good appetite. Maybe she could gain some more weight, whatever the case is. But keeping in mind the effect that kosher food becomes dama basuk b'sarei, is the Alter Rebbe's Meirich and Tanya, beyond what it says Shulchan Aruch about Timtum HaMeich Ba'alev. But the difference in my cholas asurais and all other isurim, as it says in the beginning of Tanya, the Rebbe said, so too the character and the mides teves and the edelkeit, the refinement of character and of mides that the child will grow up with, is affected by the hiddur and the edelkeit and the refinement of the food you're giving them. And when we like to do two mitzvahs only, l'shem shamayim, teich shalom l'shma, sabah l'shma. And the biggest challenge, one of the biggest challenges certainly that families face, is to go b'derech hayosher and the derech hayir shamayim, to be true God-fearing Jews and Chassidim, and in a way that they give of themselves to other people, and to be refined people, and to be kind people, and to have good midas and good character traits. So this is something with which the kashrus of the food also has a tremendous effect. I'd like to speak about a few concepts that on the one hand, you're blessed that you have some guidance from the city in general, and guidance especially in Yonah Chabad from the Rabbonim who have given of themselves to make these rough decisions. Where do you draw the line, and what yeah and what not? I'd like to just share with you some things about standards, and especially in Chabad, and some things that you might not be aware of. I don't want to make everybody nervous, but just in terms of people that think that being extra careful in kashrus is a mishagas, it's exactly the opposite. I'll just give you an example. This is not something that you can really do anything about. Why am I telling you if you can't do anything about it? Just go to shayla, but just to make you nervous. Now, there's the idea that being careful is very, very important. There was a recall from the United States government last year, I believe it was, on turmeric. I don't know if anybody heard about it. Okay, so what happened? Spices that are coming from what they call them, developing countries or underdeveloped countries, or just countries that are very far away, are being spiked with other sorts of things that make the profit margin larger. And as it turned out, there was lead containing substances in this turmeric, which turned it into a color that turmeric is supposed to have, and the one that they were selling was inferior, it didn't have this color. And there was a recall because it was found to be dangerous. Don't think they're checking every bottle of turmeric. They happened to catch it. And it was something that there was a buzz on the market that this is something that they're doing. You have entire villages in India where they have the children growing up with the results of lead poisoning. There's a professor from Harvard that went to visit one of the places, and she was the one that discovered it was coming from the turmeric. In any case, I'm just picking on it because it was just not so long ago, it was in the news. And as it happened, from the ones that were recalled included was one with kosher supervision, and not just with kosher supervision from what one would normally call from the Mehudedike Hashkacha, Chassidische Hashkacha, whatever the case is. And the reason for it is very simple. Two reasons. First of all, they're not giving the supervision to make sure that there's no lead going in. People don't usually think of such a thing. But more so, we have a whole long list of Group 1 ingredients, which different kashrus organizations compile, things which normally do not contain kashrus sensitivities, and there's no the raw materials, how far are you going to go back? You're going to be there when they're making the salt? You're going to be there when the water's coming out of the tap? So you have certain places problems with the water, okay? But otherwise, there's raw materials that do not have any kosher supervision on them at all because they're accepted. So this is something which the kashrus organizations have to make these decisions to make food available, to make it affordable, that are allowing these things. But there's all sorts of things. Don't think that everything is being relied upon. I'm sure everybody in this room knows, but just to say it clearly, people that think that everything that has a kosher symbol on it means that there's a mashgiach there in the plant are making a very, very big mistake. They're being visited on the whole. I mean, there are sensitive places where you have meat being produced, and restaurants and so on, where you need constant supervision, hashkacha tamidis. But the majority of facilities do not have that availability, and it's up to the kashrus agency to determine whether it is, how often in this particular situation you need to visit. When it comes to Pesach, so Chabad homes, what's the standard for Pesach? So everybody has different standards when it comes to Pesach. But everybody basically is going back more to producing things on their own rather than buying ready-made products in the store. I can just tell you the thing that happened this year in Montreal. There's a kosher store, and they turned all kosher LePesach for Pesach. And there are some people that use products, other people don't use products, people are peeling, people are not peeling, different sorts of things before Pesach, and sugar, and dissolving it, and straining it, different sorts of standards. Anyway, somebody went into one of these stores and bought a bag of potato chips, so it's right over there, with the display over there in the Pesach store, and then she looks at the bag and she sees there's wheat starch in it. And it turned out that the company, and it happened that the packages were almost identical in appearance, except for the kosher LePesach sign on the back. And they had a different formulation. One was kosher LePesach, one was not. And somehow, whether it was done in the store, the manufacturer claims it was done in the store. The store claims it was done by the manufacturer. In any case, it was there in a box, one of these bargain style displays where it's still there in the original packaging, but the packaging is open, things get switched around. In any case, that's what happens. There are no guarantees. You should be carefully looking at your labels. I was once in a hotel, and I was thirsty. I went down to the kiosk, and I saw over there Tropicana Ruby Red Grapefruit Juice, which I knew has normally a Circle K on it. And okay, at least they have some kosher grapefruit juice, but since I have this habit of looking at labels, so I look at the label just to make sure that the kosher symbol, I can't find the kosher symbol on it. Now sometimes they hide it, but there was once a certain actually, the organization said it was under their supervision, and yes, it's there on the package. It was a box of some sort of baby cereal where you have this metal spout that opens up like this, and you pour out the dry cereal. So many of the companies don't want to put overt signs that it's kosher. They're going to lose their neo-Nazi clientele or something. I'm not sure. We have a company that produces Pas Yisrael cookies, and they had to take it off the label because they couldn't sell it in the Muslim neighborhoods. It had the word Israel on it. In any case, they're very, very makpid. They're very careful about what goes on the label. And sometimes they don't want to show it. There are certain hashkachas, they'll just give a plain K, which means nothing at all. In New York State, it means that there's somebody that I don't know if Illinois has such a law. There's a kosher law in New York State has such a law. Huh? Then you have to register. So you have to register. I know in New York there's an office, and you have to register who's behind the K. Okay, so they're selling ravioli. Huh? Exactly. So there's somebody selling ravioli, and who's the one that says it's kosher? It's got a K on it. Says it's kosher. Is Joe Macaroni, who's the Italian guy who runs the company? I say that it's kosher. Why? Because it's clean. It's kosher. Fine. So the government can't get mixed into religion in the United States. So therefore, all you have to do is register. But there's sometimes that the K is standing behind a kosher symbol, but the company does not want to put the kosher symbol on the packaging for whatever reason. In any case, here they had it hidden underneath the little metal opening. So before you buy it, you can't see the symbol. Then you open up and you say, oh, there it is, and you close it. In any case, I don't know, maybe it was somewhere hidden on the label. I'm looking, I don't see it. And then I said, this is really strange. And then I looked a little closer, and I saw in the ingredients, it said carmine. Okay, so carmine is a natural color. The only problem is that insects are natural, and carmine is an insect. And when they took red dye number 2 off the market because it was carcinogenic, so they had to find some sort of legal alternative, and they discovered, whether it's the same as Teilah Shani that we learn in Chumash or not, whatever the case is, in camp they give bug juice, so this is the real bug juice, and that was evidently that crop of pink grapefruits were not as pink as they needed, or ruby red, whatever it was, and they added artificial coloring. So you have to read labels, and you have to be on top of things, and I find the kashrus industry fascinating because it's not a static industry. They continually find new ways to save money and new ways to do bizarre things that nobody would ever imagine. What they're growing enzymes on and things that would normally have no connection. You have seen enzymes grown on horse meat, being used. They're used to speed different sorts of food production, and you would never imagine that these things would have any kashrus issue. So that's in general about being careful about kashrus and what you can use and what you cannot use. Baruch Hashem, you have the local Chabad Rabonim to ask for guidance. But I would like to point out a number of, maybe I'll go down the list of the brochure over here to speak about various inyanim. Kashrus industry, inside look at manufacturing kosher. So although everybody in the that's getting kosher supervision wants that supervision, in general, unless you have a situation when you have a product that you're chasing after a company, which is very unusual because it puts you in a very weak bargaining position, so to speak, but the companies are looking to you because they want to make more money. That's their only motivation. They're not doing it to be nice to Jews. We once got a call from a furniture company that wanted kosher supervision. So yes, why is it you want kosher supervision? He says he doesn't really know what kosher is, but he just knows that everybody's saying that if you go kosher, you make more money. So he wanted his couches to be under kosher supervision. Okay, so fine. In any case, when you tell a company that before you're going to kasher, you have to close down your company for 24 hours. So there are many companies where they're doing that anyway. And in order kasher lechatchila, things should be an eina ben yemei, has to be sitting. Those who learn Yeredeya know, even Or Chaim, when you learn in Hilchas Pesach, that things should be not used for 24 hours before you kosherize them, before you kasher them. But sometimes they work 24/7, these factories, and they don't want to shut down. So you have to find the time that they service the equipment once a year, and you have to schedule it for them, and they want to go kosher now, so what do? So there are some kosher organizations that will not kasher ben yemei as a matter of principle, and the others have a policy that they will. And they'll find some sort of way, they'll do it twice, they'll use davar apegim, different ways of trying to take shortcuts. And everyone has their standard, and whether that meets your standard, one thing I guarantee, in your kitchen you would not allow such a keli to be used. Okay, but you are allowing such a keli to be used because you bought the product and you're eating it. So it doesn't matter whether it's cooked on your pot in your house, or it's being cooked on somebody else's pot in Thailand. So the same issue, and this is out of your vision, out of your control. Unfortunately, even for the Rabbanim, many things have to be guessed, because there's it's an ongoing debate about how much transparency there has to be in the industry. As it happens, there's multiple especially the idea of having different brands. You know, you'll go to the store and you'll find a store brand and you'll find the name brand and it looks like it's being made in the same place and almost everything is the same. And that's the fact is you walk into a factory and you'll see packaging from all different sorts of companies and all different sorts of hachsherim. And it's happened to me, and this is one of the things which ends up, I don't know why the industry evolved in such a way, but there's sort of a forced transparency in effect in the kashrus industry, which is not formalized in any sort of way, but if you're giving supervision of a place, you'll go in and you say, oh, this one's coming here also, and this one's coming here also, and everybody's making special runs. So I once came into a place, I'm not going to name names, of course, but I came into a facility that it needed to be kashered. It wasn't just for Hidurim. It needed to be kashered, and there was labels there from 5 different kashrus agencies. Now, when you leave the labels there, but you wrap them up and you put some sort of siman on it that you know they cannot be tampered with, because the whole hechsher is really that label. If somebody takes that label and puts on something else, that's the whole labeling is a major issue in kashrut. It's sort of the elephant in the room, because today you can print anything. Anytime somebody comes up with a new technology, by the time they get it onto the market, the technology has made it affordable and cheap and fast. So holograms used to be the state-of-the-art things, but it used to be very difficult to reproduce a hologram. And now holograms are also not so expensive or difficult to make. So as fast as the technology evolves, the solutions become antiquated before you can market them. So it's a very, very big issue. In any case, you always have to keep your labels under control and to make sure they weren't tampered with. So I saw, the 4 of them were all wrapped up and signed and sealed, and one of them was totally hefker, totally open over there. What people would call a chiddush hechsher, what I would or not, I didn't before, and after I saw this, certainly I didn't, and they were totally open. They could have taken these stickers over there with all the Hebrew writing on it and everything, and mahadrin with this and that, and go and put it on treifa product. Mamish treif der ice. That place was Midurban. Okay. That's manufacturing kosher when you're getting in large scales and things which are far away and you're relying on all sorts of issues. We once had an issue with a certain product and the manufacturer wanted this particular product, and it was from Europe, the Rabbi Machsher in Europe. It happened to be that I knew him, and he's a Yiras Shamayim, he's a God-fearing person, and but you know, you got to check it out. You got to check it out. So he was a little insulted that I was asking about it. But I said, listen, this is our policy, so we have to check it out. This is a very sensitive ingredient. What goes into it? Anyway, it's a small. Europe in general, the kashrus works different in comparison with North America. And he's also small, so like he doesn't have a database. Like what kind of where did this product come from? Where was it made? And when checking it out. Finally, he became very frustrated, told us to call the mashgiach. He's got a mashgiach there. The guy is a Yiras Shamayim. Unbelievable, tremendous, God-fearing person. So we called the mashgiach, speak to him, very Yiras Shamayim, Chassidish Yid, and he said, please, we're trying to find out the information. You're in the factory now? Good. Go over here and tell me what's on the bag. Give me the company with the code, and we'll check it out. Just give me the information. So he says, Zogende Memme, sagt er. Kenn ich leider kein English. Sorry, I don't know what to say. I can't read English. So I hung up the phone and I said, you know, the guy could be, it's not a chesed. I mean, Moshe Rabbeinu Mastam also couldn't read English, but that doesn't mean that you have to read the code on a bag and you don't know the alphabet. It doesn't. Anyway, when you're manufacturing things and it's a long distance, it was a company that, just give you one more example, because we could go on all day regarding this, but there was a company, but there was a problem, went into it. It turned out it was in a country in South America, and the plant had the one-time ashkacha, but then it seems that there were no visitations done over there, and a little bit of investigation showed the problem was the neighborhood became so dangerous that no taxi would drive you into that place. So nobody could visit, which doesn't make a very good situation. Okay. Let's just go down the list over here. Bishul Yisrael, the housekeeper dilemma. So it's a housekeeper dilemma, Bishul Yisrael, when you have non-Jewish help in the house. There's machlekes about people not Shomer Shabbos, And that brings out the point I said before about Chabad being machmir. So here you go and you're having your Chabad house. They're having people that are not Shomer Shabbos, where they're Machal Shabbos Parhesia, Yev Haresia, Nish Parhesia. How exactly you interpret that is a matter of debate. Somebody asked about serving wine at a Chabad house function. And they never gave it to him over the head. Who asked you to go into a shayla? Do you have to go and rely on leniencies? Who asked you to serve wine? So don't serve wine. And the exact same din applies to, not exact the same din, but in general. So when it comes to Bishul Yisrael, so you have issues in terms of giving hashgacha, and I just have to mention, Rav David Cohen from the CRC, who I communicate with, came out now with a sefer about Bishul Yisrael and Pas Yisrael, and to all the very, very deserving of credit and honorable mention that all the standards of the CRC are written down. This is what we hold, this is our standard for Pas, and this is our standard for Bishul, which is not to say that we necessarily agree with all that, but that's fine. But if you're making it clear what it is that your standards are, so that is the, so I don't know, not Shomer Shabbos would be allowed for Bishul? No. Okay. So,
set it up that way. It has to be the evidence.
yeah, I'm not talking about something happened. I'm talking about to give the Lachatchil to go and set up the Hefshan. Yeah. I know a Chabad Shliach who's a Rav in the city, and where he went, and there was a pizza store, and there was an Israeli over there, and he demanded a mashgiach light the fires. And then, they decided they didn't want to pay for that anymore, because he was Jewish, and they got him another hashgach. Fine. In any case, when it comes to Bishul Yisrael, there are many standards. I saw the booklet I saw a draft of the booklet that's made over here by your local Rabbonim, ACRI. So it alludes to many issues, but let me just mention some of the ones which are most applicable and salient. In terms, there are many machlekes in defining what needs Bishul Yisrael, what does not need Bishul Yisrael. One very large area is how do you define Ela Shulchan Malachim? If something is served at the king's table. So the fact is that today we don't really have kings. They don't make kings like they used to. Whether they make the king's table like they used to is another question. You go and you find a king today. The kings in general have the power of life and death. In any case, I once saw a contrast. I think it was 40 years ago. I saw a contrast somebody wrote. He wrote to all the royal kitchens in the world and asking the royal chef, does the king, queen eat sardines? There was a whole contrast on sardines. And I looked at it and said, this is the most ridiculous thing I ever saw in my life. But I really regret not having spent the 40 cents, however much it cost back on with any letters, from the royal kitchen of the King of Denmark, eat sardines. So, in any case, I don't know whether the King of Denmark qualifies as a king. Huh? Yeah. In any case, so whether we have such a thing as being able to define Shulchan Malachim today or not, every kashrus organization has its definition, and so I learned kashrus by Rabbi Hendel Olav Shalom. Rabbi Hendel was a mumche, yodua, not only in halacha but also in the technology. He was offered jobs by a few factories when he came in, and he made it obvious that he knew how the equipment worked better than they did. The people that were in charge. He would come into place and say, why are you doing it like this instead of like this? You could save a lot of money doing it like this. They bring in the head of the company and says, he's right. In any case, he was also a mumcha, yaduum, comes in yana halacha. He held, it was very, very machmer. I'm not telling you what your standards, you go to your local rabbanim. But he said that today, the whole idea of Shulchan Malachim, we have really no idea what it is. You have in Darkei Tshuva, he brings down, let's take one very famous machlekes. Do you look at the tzura of the food, or you look at the chemer from which the food is made out of? So when you have something, maybe some potato chips is the most famous one. Why is the most famous one? Because most of the food today is being made with steam anyway. That's the cheapest way to manufacture food. And there are many hatadim that steam is not called derech bishul. That's itself a machlekes. And there's none of the machlekes, even if you're going to steam, is not considered a regular way of bishul, but there are different types of steam. You have steam, which it's being cooked with steam, like you have in a steamer, and then you have the steam heating up the water, which is cooking the food. Then you have the steam, which is going on a plate, which is heating up the metal that makes it inside like an oven, and you have all different sorts of permutations of what's called steam or what's not called steam. But potato chips, I hear now today, they're also making potato chips with the steam. You ever saw it? I hear somebody told me they have a new place over there that they're heating up the oil with steam. How exactly that works? You're going to have it under a lot of pressure to be able to get oil to that temperature. I don't know. I didn't see it. It's hard for me to believe, but I was told there's such a metzias. In any case, normally you fry it, and you're not going to get the oil hot enough to fry a potato with steam. So that's why you hear the whole question about Bishul Yisrael with the potato chips more than any other product. Now, potatoes many years ago were not considered to be an important, respectable food, and it was garbage food. Watching the clock here. Okay. In any case, a very big machlekes. Do you go after the potato? Today, potatoes, people are going out for steak and potatoes. It's a whole, you have potato kugel being served for Shabbos. It's not a shameful thing to be eating potatoes. To say that the potato itself, you'd say, is considered to be a choshev food. Potato chips, you go to many of the kashrus organizations use as a criterion whether it would be served at a wedding. So you normally don't find potato chips at a wedding, but you can find potatoes, at a wedding. So do you look at the chemer, do you look at the tzura? So there are many arguments. In general, the Chassidish Achsherim, and including the Chabad Rabonim that I have learned from, hold that you go after the chemer. One of the explanations is that if you go after the tzura, the way the food is cooked. So with all due respect, my wife, my daughter, my whole family, they're fantastic cooks. But I'm not 100% sure they could get a job as the head chef in the king of Denmark. I don't know, there was still such a metzias. Whatever the case is, when what they're serving at a royal meal is not what the average person is getting at a local restaurant, or even at a caterer, and certainly not at home. So therefore, if the non-Jewish help takes a chicken and puts it in the oven, so if you're going to go after the tzura of the food, so this is Eila Shulchan Melachim, nothing's Eila Shulchan Melachim unless you're a melech. And they're in general not Jewish anyway. We're talking about non-Jewish kings. Some say we're talking about Jewish kings. In any case, that is an issue that goes through many inyonim in kashrus, and there are, in general, the major achsherim go to the lenient side. Generally go towards the strict side, but regarding the particulars, I'll leave that to your local rabbanim. Pas Yisrael is something which is also that it even brings in Darkei Tshuva. I saw a sefer regarding Pas Palta. There are certain leniencies when you have bread which is baked with for public use by a baker. There are many hatarim. Darkei Tshuva brings down from Kisvi Arizal. The Arizal was machmer. I saw a sefer on Kasha, something somebody wrote about this whole issue, and he said, and it's known that Chassidim are strict about this. From Darkei Tshuva, and it's takas. This is something which Pas Palta, the Arizal. Although when you look at Shulchan Aruch, Pas Yisrael is more lenient really than Bishul Yisrael. But when it comes to our minute, we have more hatarim for Bishul Yisrael than we have to Pas, because the Pas, once it's Pas Palta. By the way, remind me later, I might have some buns for you. Maybe. Next on the list over here, Cholav Yisrael. So Cholav Yisrael, Cholav Stam. So it's known that we have, aside from the DA issue, that the displaced Avmasim issue, that Rabbi Fishbein mentioned before, that even if something is En Yisrael Re'ehu, it's well known the various Sipurim regarding this from the Alter Rebbe, that it's something which affects Emunah, aside from the fact that we know that there's nothing which is not from a kosher species mixed in. In general, the dairy industry is a difficult industry. When you're talking about products, so today when they figured out the taste in all foods is basically coming from fats. And you have vegetable fat is given what makes a carrot taste like a carrot, so it's got less fat than the marbled steak that we've heard about before. But nevertheless, the taste is being conveyed in such a fashion, so when they take all the fat out of the milk, they also take all the taste out of the milk. They take the fat out of the milk and they convert it into money by making various sort of milk products out of it. And those milk products itself, how much are they making it from skim? So you have to find a way to take something. You can make today cottage cheese where it looks like cottage cheese, but it tastes more like particle board, softened, of course. But in order to get the taste back in, so some places use milk powder, some places use flavors. Now, milk powder is anytime you're dealing with these spray dryers, they're very difficult to kasher. There are many opinions on how to kasher them, and many of the organizations consider it to be just a difficult situation, too difficult to do. And remember when I was with the CHK many years ago, so the Marla Shalom made them do a libum kal on the whole silo, and they made us take out insurance, and we got over there a flamethrower. A different type of torch over there. It was the last time they did that, but everything was okay. Everything was fine. We had a mumcher who was doing it, but that's a big chumrah. I'm not saying you have to do that, but the coolers that are being used are very, very unusual coolers. Plus, you have different places when you're dealing with cultures. So just like you have people that become accustomed, the body becomes accustomed to antibiotics. So too the milk becomes impervious to the various cultures. They have to keep rotating them, and what happens when all the ones with a good hashgacha run out? And I was once checking out in a place over there, the rotation for the various cultures over there, and I said, can I take a picture? I'd have to bring it back to check on our list in the office. I didn't have my computer with me to check out all of the codes. That had the person that was there before had changed, so I couldn't verify it directly, as is usually done. I said, you can't take a picture of that. That's our trade secret, how we rotate our cultures. In any case, it's very, Rab Zalman Shimon Dvarkin once, he once told me, he says, if you have a dairy facility and they always have everything, you can be sure there's problems. Because it's a delicate, difficult, many of the products are difficult to make and they're very sensitive, so it needs very good hashgacha. Next on the list of your kosher wine. So wine is an extremely sensitive product. I'll just speak about one thing. I actually wrote an article in the MK magazine for Pesach, and I said that I'm just telling everybody the standards. I hold by telling people, even if it has a leniency, has a kula, so that people have to know that there's a kula. I mean, anybody that ever read Rabbi Fishbane's thesis on Starbucks, so to his great credit, he writes over there that the CRC Psak, according to the Av Bezdin, is that you don't need to kasher from not Cholav Yisrael to Cholav Yisrael. Okay, so I think that's fantastic that he tells everybody. So therefore I know that I can't drink it, because it's certainly Chabad saying we need to kasher, the whole tumul about 212. It's not 212, it's Ma'aler Sicha. You have a whole tshuva taka from the Zalman Shimon about it, about the whole issue, that the Rebbe was Magiya, this tshuva. In any case, it's a very difficult issue, and many times you don't know the standards of the organizations. So I wrote an article about wine. So there's a machlekes about how much you have to cook the wine in order to have it considered to be mabushal. So it's printed in Igros Meisha that you have a lower, to make it simple, there's a lower temperature and there's a higher temperature. So the Av Bezdin, after Rabbi Hirschberg in Montreal, was Rabbi Nishnikol of Shalom. So he was very, very strong. He was a Talmud, he passed a lot like Rav Meisha, but he totally disagreed with him, and he held that you had to have the higher standard. Now, when you're giving a hechsher, and they're going to put an MK on it by us, so therefore we require the higher standard. If it's being used as an ingredient, so then people are relying on us, so we pass them, this is what you need. But if you're by a simcha, and the bala simcha, there's a wedding, and he wants to serve this type of wine, and it has a hechsher on it, and they're using the other standard. So we pass that as long as it's coming there with the bottle, so nobody's forcing you to drink it. You can take the bottle, look at it. I mean, especially if it's a finer mensch, and you look at the bottle of wine before, you have to look at it, smell the cork, or the plastic, whatever's on it. In any case, the metal cap, and like a guy goes to see the car, he kicks the tires, you smell the cap. Anyway, so he has a choice whether he wants to rely on this hechsher or he doesn't want to rely on this hechsher. Then people come and complain to me, how are you allowed to be served? I said, you rather I didn't tell you? He said, it's going on over here for 50 years, this policy. You should know the policy. So the problem is that it's very difficult to get this information. And I think that's where the consumer comes in, and Rabbi Fisher, please correct me if I'm wrong, but kashrus agencies really appreciate it when people find problems. Okay, there's only so many mashgichim. You find a problem, and something doesn't look right, you with me? Call the agency. They say, people call all the time. I saw such a thing happen. I said, did you call? No. I said, so why not? We're dealing with human beings here. Mistakes happen. Things change. So too, I think that the places that are producing kosher wine, you should know, because if you have a Rav Machshir and he holds by the lower temperature and he holds his mavushal, so he doesn't have to be careful after that whether the nachrim are handling the wine. Okay, so it's not just a question you're going to buy it in the store later on and then you're going to be careful with it. And the laws of wine, it's a whole big section of Shulchan Aruch and Riches and the Gemara, many inyanim. So what type of wine you use, very, very important. Famous story with the Rebbe Marash. Okay, the broken bones we heard about. As far as meat is concerned, again, you have to use your local rabbinic guidance. I'll just tell you a maisa about how much it's changed. When I learned in Keilu, Rabbi Eller told us that when he was growing up in Yerushalayim, they would shecht one animal a week. And the whole Bezdin would come out and look. And they would wait, and the sheikh, everybody checked the knife first, and it was a whole thing. And then when it came time to check the lung, you couldn't afford, like today, you go to South America, you go to these places over there, and anything that's Steinish Island, you just don't have any time. You just treif, kosher, treif. Things are flying by. I mean, fame is not flying yet. I mean, with all the genetic GMO foods, still the Frankenfurter. So far, I haven't seen the cows fly. Maybe someday. But in any case, they're flying by. I mean, in terms of the speed, and it's very, very difficult. You need tremendous amount of Yirah Shamayim and divine assistance in order that it should come out to be proper, and therefore having the pervasive effect that kosher meat has, that it's something which needs the highest level of supervision. And of course, when you're going out, it's like, people who work in restaurants, they don't necessarily eat the food that they're serving because they see what's happening there. So although, you see the kosher symbol outside the restaurant, but it doesn't mean that they're using the same standards that happen in your kitchen. You might give it away to the non-Jewish help. Okay? So you are relying on the people there, and it's not to say that it doesn't meet some level of standard of kashrus, but it just might not be yours. In any case, I'll leave the floor open now for questions. We have a lot of hatzlacha and yochel yom emelu also no simple.
People sent in questions already. Those will be addressed now, both by Fisher and Bell. You can still continue. We will end the program at 12:30.
We'll switch off. Is that the smart thing? Right, I want to, as Rabbi Bell was giving his kosher drasha, and the ones that we both don't want to answer, Rabbi Hertz will answer. So Rabbi Hertz, here's my. I jotted down a couple of things that I wanted to mention based on what Rabbi Bell said. Rabbi Bell asked, do we welcome people's ha'aras and they see things? It reminded me of I heard from Ramat Yisrael that he quoted the Or Chaim, that when Adam ate from the Eitz Hadas, so Hashem said to him, why'd you eat from the Eitz Hadas? So what did he say? Basically, Zak the Or Chaim, I trusted the Mashgiach. She was the Mashgiach. It's almost like that. So Zak Ramat Yisrael, Vice the Chais, don't trust the Mashgiach, ask. So we do welcome. My only request is don't put it on social media before you give us a chance to look into it. I think that's fair. The other thing I want to mention is, Rabbi Hertz pointed out the passing of Rabbi Goldzweig. The CRC together with others are having a zikaron for Rabbi Goldzweig Mirz Hashem in 2 weeks on Monday, July 16th. And we'll be posting it, but something certainly give cover to, frankly, the father of kashrus in America. 2 other points, more practical. We've all talked about potato chips. I have a B'sura Toiva to tell you. If there happens to be one national brand that doesn't say Bishul Yisrael in it, but they have it Bishul Yisrael, the plant managers of Fruma Yid, a friend of mine actually, and that's these Terra chips. You know, if you go on JetBlue, you get those blue, they happen to put Bishul Yisrael into, they have an element into the fryers, and it's a good idea. So finally, mentioned before about K meaning is worthless, I just want to point out here in Chicago, we're battling it. If you notice on the corner over there on McCormick and Devon, there's that Lebanese. So we've been into that place. I know I'm being recorded, so I'll be very careful here. But he came up with his own hechsher. There's a big K. You'll see it on the packaging. You can see it in the supermarkets. He puts it on the side of his. It's a big K, and in little letters underneath the K, he writes, "Kosher ingredients only used."
It's in big letters.
Big letters? Well, okay, maybe on the signs, but on the packaging. Let me tell you, we've been in the factory. I'll say in Yiddish, "Mekenish das." In Arab, I don't know. Okay. All right, I'll just take the first question. I'll get it over to Rabbi Bell. Someone asked about buying salmon in Costco. So the CRC policy is that obviously the there are certain daraisas, one of them being fish and needs to have simoni kashrus. The idea I mentioned before about the eel with the salmon is a great example. Let's say they play with the DNA and they get the eel to grow fins and scales. Is it mutter then? So this is a lomdish shaila. Is the basar, is the fins and scales a simon or a siva? Not for now. But the Vaila, salmon is the only fish out there that's unique in its color. They've tried many times to feed other fish red type of pigment or other things like that, and the other types of fish, kosher and treif, ended up like humans. If you ever eat a lot of carrots, you look at your skin, you're glowing orange, because it goes to the skin, not with the flesh. Salmon's the only birria that it happens like that. So Mamela, our opinion is that you can buy salmon anywhere, even if it doesn't have fins and scales. And therefore, if you go buy those, frozen salmon raw in the Costco, it does not need a hechsher. It's processed in places that only do salmon, and halachically, even if there would be something, a min tameh, the knives, it's not for now. Therefore, it would not. Obviously, it's best to buy with a hechsher. I'm saying you're out on vacation, you're going to over there. Our opinion is that it does not need a special hechsher.
Can you just clarify? I don't hear it. Because Sam's got Costco.
What?
Costco, Sam's Club.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Just, okay, to repeat, buying a piece of frozen salmon, raw, that doesn't have a hechsher on it, and you don't have an alternative, that's very important, and you're on vacation or whatever it is, you have no alternative, you may buy this based on the fact that it's a min tahar, this has been proven throughout all the agencies, and we're not concerned about any of the knives,
By the way,
cutting.
in Costco, the fresh salmon has skin.
Okay, so now I'll get to fresh. I'm talking about frozen fruit. Now, if one wants to, for whatever reason, halachically you may not have to, but if you want to be machmer on the cut salmon, the negay, you're worried about maybe the knife was used for something else. So the halacha talks what to do. It says to do shifshuf. Shifshuf means rubbing, where you take the part that was cut and you rub it well under cold water, and then you're yoitzel l'chol hadayos. Fresh. What you should do is, again, you're in a place, you live out, I used to live in Buffalo, New York, so we're malumin in the B'di'evids, we'll call it. He first told me that when he took Shemush by Rav Moshe, he took it together with Rabbi Winter. Rabbi Winter was going to Buffalo, and we first going to Chicago. So Rav Moshe told Rabbi Winter that all his b'di'evas are your lechatchilas, depends on where you live, so don't worry about it. So if you're in a city or whatever, like you go to Costco, whatever it is, so what you should do, you should ask them if you see the fish that has the fins and scales, that has the scales, you're 100%. Salmon, as I said, doesn't, even if they took it off with salmon, it's okay. You should ask them to put on a new butcher paper, fresh butcher, that paper that hasn't been used yet, and ask them, do you mind, I keep kosher, can I inspect the knives to make sure they're 100% clean? And basically you're just looking to see if there's fat, shamnunis, which, by law they have to be clean before they cut. And if not, you have them clean it. I was just in Monticello, in the shop right there. There's a lot of Yidden this time of year. And, you know, I go for, in the castles, we go for Pesach there. So I felt like the local, like, you know, it's quiet, there's no one around. All of a sudden everyone's invading, you know, so I felt like, you know, like one of the, how they feel over there. But over there they have a box of special knives that they use in the summer just for the kosher people, and that's how they do it in ShopRite. Okay, so that's been a salmon. I have several other questions, but I'd like to give everybody go.
Just want to add a few words about salmon. There happens to be there's a professor in Eretz Yisrael who many years ago fed. There's a certain type of feed. The salmon, wild salmon, Alaska. There's no farm salmon, but affordable salmon is all farm salmon, and they give. The flesh would not have any color if they didn't give it a certain type of feed. It's not dyed, it's synthesized a duplicate of the chemical which is in their natural feed that they eat when they're at sea. So, and you can get today, you can order what color you want your salmon to be. They have a Samo fan, which is a Pantone chart, and you order which number you want according to how much feed they're gonna be. The deeper the color, the more feed they give it. I met a professor from Eretz Yisrael, for the communicative, that I met him, who actually turned catfish the color of salmon. Okay? I met him together with the Chaim Goldberg. We had this. He says, "I don't believe you." He says, "You cannot believe me." He says, "But I did it." And he told me himself, and not observant of it, but so he told me. He says, "Listen, I don't eat kosher." He says, "But if I would eat kosher, I wouldn't rely on this heter." However, one thing which is very, very true, and that's why all the kashrus agencies really allow it, we also allow it, and that is that nobody would do such a thing. It's just too prohibitively expensive. You'd have to be crazy to do such a thing. It's much cheaper to do it. There's no justification or motivation, that's the word I was looking for, to do that. So it's really not a problem. Rabbi Shimon allowed the salmon without the simonim. But again, the difference, and he touched on it, Rabbi Fishman, that it's very, very crucial. What's the difference between a lechatchila and a b'diavad? They got called, somebody stuck, they got stuck in a city, their plane got canceled, whatever the case is, they have nothing to eat. So to buy a piece of salmon in the store, so it's not so hard to find one with the skin on it. Now, just having skin on it doesn't mean it's kosher. You're going to buy a mackerel with a skin on it, you're not going to see any scales. And you can't tell the difference whether it's a kosher fish or not just because it has skin. You have to be able to tell either there are scales, or you have to be able to have enough expertise to show that there are signs that you can tell in the skin that once upon a time that had scales. And then you clean the surface. The Alter Rebbe brings in Chlos Pesach about somebody who caught a fish with a knife to go, and even in such a case, he's not saying to do a lechatchila, but b'diavad, if it happened, you don't throw out the fish. He sends you over there to, as Fishman said, about a shifshuf, so there's not a problem. But again, you have the issue of lechatchila and b'diavad, and that's a very dangerous line to cross between lechatchila and b'diavad. Okay, I'll take one question. I guess we'll alternate maybe. How's that sound? How do we know which hachsherim according to strictest Chabad standards? I wish somebody could answer that question for me. The fact is that even, the best hachsherim, the reputation of the best hachsherim in the world, you have Eid Achredis and you have Rav Landa. Rav Landa is Lubavitcher Rav, but not everything he does over there is necessarily Lubavitch. It's a very high standard of kashrus, or knows a higher standard is whether it exists. But again, he's doing certain things for the city and certain things which he would not want for himself. Somebody asked a similar question over here. If there's so many Tatum, is there any way to be 100%? Is there any true chumrah to not eating at restaurants or caterers? Aren't all the products with a hechsher in the grocery just as problematic, quote unquote, reliant on a Tatum, quote unquote? Okay, what people are capable of living with is even in your own home, something happened and something got mixed up. So this is an Ein B'Nyem, is that called relying on a heter? You washed it and you cooked it and it was more than 24 hours, and the Rav tells you it's okay. Is that called a heter? If it's mutter, it's mutter. But sometimes when the heter becomes the lechatchila, that's where the problem comes in. Now, do you expect to find the same level of kashrus in a restaurant or cater as you do in your own home? I suppose it depends what's going on in your own home, and also what's going on in the restaurant and the caterer. But in general, if somebody that's 100% not relying on anything, you just can't. Anybody knows themselves, and can you be as careful as the food if you're cooking for 100 people as if you're cooking for 5 people? As things get up in volume, there's human beings make mistakes and things happen. That doesn't mean you shouldn't eat in a restaurant. Okay, but 100%, eat the whole year like you do Pesach. You're going to make everything. You want to grind your own wheat. What exactly do you want to do? You'll probably have more problems if you grind your own wheat because you're going to have to hold it for so long and you're going to end up with bugs in it. I do want to say one last thing before I hand over for the next question. And there's a misconception. I've heard it from different people. I asked from Makedis from them that they say, Chabad, we don't go this whole mishagas with the teloyim, with the bugs. Chabad, we're not, Anybody ever heard such a thing before? Good. So I'm not going to address it. I'm not going to address it. Not in Chicago. The one heter you have the raisin shaila that the Rabbi Fishbein, you have a tzamach tzedek that makes it not only a svek arataz, he adds a third suffix. So it's even less of a problem according to the tzamach tzedek. But there's a whole famous tshuva about somebody checked the cabbage, and then they found out later they found some bugs over there in the cabbage, and looking for a way that since it was chopped and since it was mashed and became always better to go and be matter with many tzirufim to go and put it together. But to take from there any sort of heter is not. The thing about OUD and dairy equipment, according to Chabad, where our standard is very clear, that we have a mugadik tshuva from the Rebbe on that, and that you have to kasher, and you have to do a complete kasher, not just a b'diavad hechsher. So DE is dairy equipment. DE is dairy equipment, and therefore, one of the on our Bezdin, so we have from all the different groups. You have Svardish Rabbanim, you have Litvish Rabbanim, you got Skver, you got Bells. We have everybody sitting together. Everybody, we got one group does. But anyway, everybody else sits together, and we're discussing some sort of kashrus issue. So one of the Litvish Rabbanim says, "You don't understand." He says, "For Chabad, it's mamish treif. You don't understand." So that's it. So if it's dairy equipment, as far as we're concerned, it might as well not been kashered. If you're talking about for your own home and you're keeping Chol of Yisrael. That is the Metzias. It's not Chas v'Sholom to say that there's not another standard and that everything else that's not kosher. But for your home, it's not kosher. It's not a question of being dairy or not dairy. It has to be kosher, the proper hash.
I want to add to Rebel's comment. Any hiddur in Chicago which COC has, for instance, like a liquor, that's the standards we go by here. We don't. We go by those standards. Same thing to Elohim and everything else. To clarify. The other thing I want to say about Chol of Akum that people should be aware of, because people are not so stringent about the utensils. A lot of restaurants or places could have utensils that are not Chol of Yisrael. That's something to be very careful about.
They'll say that they're Chol of Yisrael.
What?
They'll say that they're Chol of Yisrael.
They'll say Chol of Yisrael, but it doesn't mean that Chol of Yisrael in our standards. And us, it's a real problem.
Okay. I have 3 questions here about bugs. Do we eat confectionery glaze? So what that is, that's that shine that you find on myconites and other things. That does come from a bug, from a lac bug. The heter that Ramesha talks about is Lamaisa. When they take it out, it's completely inedible. And it's not royal achila. It's not for now, but a lot of the Hasidic Welt does not rely on this heter, and therefore I can't answer if we eat them. I assume they're not. What I've heard told me Chabad is machmer. So L'mashal, if you go to the Illinois note, he has 2 sections. He has it with the shellac confectionery glaze and without the shellac, and that one's on the left side. You'll know. Yeah.
I just mention the Illinois nut. People do not realize that the pretzels, the things that are not Pas Yisrael, and it's basically
The cookies also.
I think you could get yes or not.
It could be.
I asked him 2 weeks ago, he said no.
You have to ask because it could be
Sometimes
not.
they have, sometimes they have.
Okay, you should be aware of that. That's all.
It's not only Illinois nut, it's every restaurant. The crackers and cans are not.
All right, the other bug questions. What are there some fruit and vegetables that one should not eat at all because they're too difficult? That ties into the same question about blending vegetables, known to have more bugs in soup and these things. So, I mentioned before we hired someone just to work on bugs. The reason is you always have to determine how bad it is. If it's muchzak b'talayim, which makes it daraisa, and it's not meat on matzah, then it doesn't help to blend it. You're basically taking itzer and you're blending it. So there's not one answer for that. So broccoli is known to be very infested. In general, in produce, if it's organic, it's even more infested than the regular. So frozen blackberries would not be muhsik. The way they harvest them and they freeze them brings it lower to meat on matzui. So therefore, blending it, not for the purpose of getting rid of the bugs, because that's what you want in your drink, would be okay, versus something like, organic kale, which, blending it wouldn't do it. So there's no one answer. I'll just give you the darim. You have to call us and find out what's the story with strawberries this year. How bad is it? Is it at the highest alert, like, when you go, a red alert, whatever the TSA has, or is it middle? Is it yellow, red, green, orange? And based on that, you'll know if you're allowed to blend it in blending or not. Another question related to that is this: someone specifically wants to know about these a particular texture that looks like a Wisconsin K. It's not a Wisconsin K. It's a Peru K. And it's a very common question we get, especially with artichokes. And we do allow some of them. I think we allow the bottoms, right? Not the hearts. Call the office. I overhear the secretaries answering, and they know much more than me. Those are the bug questions. Oh wait, another bug question. I can't read this. What? Shellac and fruit. Oh, right. So there is a coating on a lot of fruits. When you walk into the supermarket, they actually do coat them to retain freshness and to make it look good. Believe it or not, there's not kosher in many of those coatings. Halachically, it's been gone through many times now. First, there is something called a grapple. A grapple is an apple that you can buy in the supermarket, but they actually do put some wine flavoring on the covering. That's not kosher. Even though it's in the fruit section, generally people aren't worried looking for Hechsherim on fruit. That's not kosher. So, but what about the regular apple? It just has the shine on it. So the bad news is that there is a possibility that they put in some, so there's some alcohol and whatnot that goes into making the shine itself. The good news is that by the time they evaporate out everything to get to the actual shine, not only is it's inedible if you just somehow peel it off and eat it, it's absolutely inedible. Together with the fruit, it's tolerable. You don't even taste it, that's how tolerable. And it's so minute that the Paiskim have said that it could be eaten. Again, ask your own child, your own Paiskim. Certainly Pesach is when people say, Chumrah de Pischa, they'll just peel the vegetables. That's a lot of times where that comes from.
Just one other thing on the bug issue. I'll use it to answer one of the questions here that said, is there anything of a chumrah that's not considered important? So no, there's no such thing as a chumrah that's not considered important if it's a chumrah. But sometimes, and I've been at halachic presentations regarding the issue of insects in food. So I remember seeing once someone had a slideshow, and the magnification was like twice the size of from here to the ceiling. So it was huge screen, and they had the magnification of a certain insect that somebody found a base on the surface of something which doesn't normally need to be checked. And a mamish looked like a monster that was ready to consume New York City. And the people were gasping in the audience. And it would remind me of the old days that Alta Magidim, you hear stories over there, and it comes to Saras Mitruva, and the ladies are fainting from the gallery, and people were shrieking. So, and many of the alerts that get sent out, I once received an alert from one of these agencies with pictures and magnified pictures, and the bugs look terrible. So if you have any questions, please email the following. So I emailed and I said, can you please tell me Where was this cheder from? What time of the year? How many did you check? And what do you find? And what is your definition of miyat hamatzi? Because as the people in the industry know, the word miyat hamatzi, okay, fine. Is it a miyat hamatzi? It's not a miyat hamatzi. Okay, but how do you count a miyat hamatzi or not? There are many, many different ways to count. Do you count every blueberry as a unit? Do you count every serving size? How do you figure that out? You look for the U.S. government or what they give you in yeshiva? Do you look at the amount you buy? Do you serve out a meal, and how many people is considered an average size meal? Is it everything in the bag? How do you measure your sample size? And then what's the percentage the Welt uses? You want to talk about standards? So the only reason nobody talks about it because this question completely destroys all the statistics until you decide this. Everybody's talking about to use this percentage or to use that percentage. This is much more important than the percentage, how it is you're counting. So everybody uses the Mishkan Yankiv is 10%. It's clear from the Tzemach Tzedek he uses a smaller percentage, but he doesn't put down a percentage. And it's all big machlekes haposkim. How much does it have to be that it's called motzui? And it's called miyat she'eina motzi is potter from bedika, which means, to put it straight, if you have 100 apples, and one of them has a bug in it, and there's 100 people in the room, Shulchan Aruch says you can give every person in the room an apple, heter gomer, and everybody can eat their apple. And one person in the room is going to be over the Isser Teiloy. That's what the Shulchan Aruch says. You want to go lifnim b'shur saden and check it because it's 1 out of 100? By all means, that's called a hider. Okay? Is that a chumrah that's important or not? I would think it is, but it's really not so possible to live like that. If you look at the defect action levels from the U.S. government, you're going to have something that doesn't have any single fragment of anything that you don't want to eat, you won't eat. Because it's impossible to make food that's 100% pure. So that's the issue. So however scary the insect is, it can be scary, but is it a miyat hamatzi? It's not a miyat hamatzi. So when you're talking about halacha, first you need to have the halacha. You want to be machmir beyond the halacha, that's something else. I just want to mention something else about Bishul Yisrael, Pas Yisrael. There's a very interesting statement from Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, who was a very, very great pasuk, not a Chassidish Rebbe. He writes that in his opinion, that one of the major factors contributing to intermarriage in Chutz La'aretz is all of the leniencies in Pas Yisrael and Bishul Yisrael that they're using. Doesn't say it about Pas. Okay, good. Stand corrected. Bishul Yisrael. They're all the coolest that they're using. This was so you have some places. We asked over here about standards. Somebody writes Chalav Yisrael on it. Somebody asked over here, what are the OU standards when it comes to writing Chalav Yisrael on something? So that's an example of what I said before. My advice to you is to call up the OU and ask, what are your standards when you write Chalav Yisrael? And they should be able to tell you their standards. Ask them, I don't know. That's what their standards are. But they remember a big hashkacha, and I went and spoke to Rabbi Machsher. It was a place who was making cheese. I happened to know the Rabbi Machsher, he's a Yerushalayim, so I asked him, how are you kashering? You kashering in 212? He says, yeah, we're kashering 212. And he's hesitating in his voice, this and that. He felt uncomfortable. He said, rather not discuss it. Okay, fine, rather not discuss it. I found out later they were using one mashgiach to go to 4 different farms for a Chalav Yisrael supervision. So there's some places using cameras. It's a very controversial thing. But, that again, you ask your local Rabbanim what they feel about that. Somebody asked over here about organic meat and the turkeys and the milk and the hormones being used or not. So I'm going to answer with an incident, which I'm not trying to build up or to be mavatal anything. I'll just a ma'aser shahoy. So it was a guy, a Chassidish guy with a long beard, and he had an egg farm. Organic eggs, free range chickens. The chickens run around, and the organic feed and everything like this. And he's going on and on about all the eggs in the world are like this, and his eggs are like this. So I'm listening. Then I asked him, just tell me one thing. I said, how long are your days? How long are your days? Your chicken's days. So you look at me like I'm crazy, right? So people have a 24-hour day. But if you're a hen, you don't have a 24-hour day. Because you need a certain number of days before you produce an egg, right? So what they do is they adjust the lighting, and you start making the day shorter. Okay, so they make it a 23-hour day. Then they make it a 22-hour day. Until the chicken's time to get up, time to go to sleep, time to get up, make another egg, let's make another egg, time to go to sleep, time to wake up, until the chickens finally crack up. Pardon the expression. And the quality becomes unusable, so they found how far you can push this creature that'll still produce marketable eggs. So I asked him, organic, and you're natural, and you're this, and that, and how long are your days? And the guy's head went like this. Went down, and he said, you're right. He said, but if I had to do it 24-hour days, I would go out of business. There's no way I can compete. So you're asking about what hormones are given. There's a whole range of things that everybody tries your best. And, you know, if you're getting, you know, meat from South America, it's less likely to have these hormones. But on the other hand, people don't necessarily like to eat it because it's too tough. You know why it's too tough? Because it's running around. Okay, so it's when you want it to run around and be free, and then you want it to be tender. Okay, so everybody says they want natural, but then when you make natural, you can't sell it. People are not willing to pay the price. So you'll find, and you have to read, there's some stuff that goes on the label, some stuff doesn't go on the label. It's a whole complicated thing. So if you want to know about a particular thing, whether it's organic or not, you'd really have to know a lot more about the raising these creatures. I'll just mention one other thing. There's a question over here about the Lubavitcher Shechita. So, again, I'm leaving this to the local Rabbanim to translate this into action. I didn't know you were in Buffalo. I was also in Buffalo. Yeah, sure. You're cool. In any case, stuff from MMA. I was there. Starren. So, as it happens, so therefore we spoke before about what's available in the community, what are the standards, and what's available in the world. As I mentioned before, I learned by Rabbi Handel. He is the only Lubavitcher Rav I am aware of that I've heard clearly that the Rebbe spoke to about Lubavitch Shechita. Okay? And the Rebbe wanted it done in Montreal. There's certain letters about it also, but he didn't go into any pratim over there. And it was so important to him that Rabbi Hirschberg, Olav Shalom, they were Yedidei Nefesh, very, very close, but Rabbi Hirschberg did not want separate Shechitas in Montreal, because he felt it would split the city. And Rabbi Handel heard from the Rebbe, so he did it, and there was a split for them for a number of years over this issue, because he considered it to be so important. The Rebbe said as follows, and he said it to me many times, and there were several Yechidas, and he spoke to him and different elements of it. And he said as follows, and Rabbi Handel said it to me many, many times, and every time his eyes would glisten. He said, the sheikhet is a Yireh Shamayim, he's a God-fearing sheikhet, you're allowed to eat from his shechita. But Lubavitcher shechita is that the Lubavitcher Rebbe is responsible for it. Okay? And his eyes was like, so I said, Rabbi Handel, it was a Heilige Werte. And I said, but what does that mean? What does that mean? And he chazer it over many, many times. So there are many different pirushim on what exactly what the Rebbe meant, but I can tell you what I tell the shach. When we make a shechita, I tell the shach like this: you're working fast, and you have a ma'isa, and there's something with a challah, hargosha, it's a this, it's a that. I said, if you know the Rebbe is taking responsibility for it, you're feeding it to the Rebbe. You let it go, you don't let it go. That's what it's about, and that's something which, if somebody would tell me the such and such Rebbe, he might be a very, very holy Jew, and he's not my Rebbe. So it's kosher. No, everything's kosher. But it's not that he's shechting for you, he's shechting for the Rebbe. It's two different things. Chas v'sholem. But on the other hand, you're going to think twice and 3 times and 4 times and 5 times before you go and let something through. So that's something which aside the Rebbe told him also that Yireh Shamayim, according to the Rambam, and he'll to say that Torah comes from meditation on Gadlus Hashem, and that brings you to Abbas Hashem and Yiras Hashem. And he says, in the main way, be Yemena Elu, to come to that idea of understanding the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in Chassidus Chabad, where it speaks at great length about the Gadlus Hashem to bring you to level of Abbas Hashem, Yiras Hashem. How it translates into practicality, I can't tell you.
That's what I came to hear. You know, it happens to be in the world of kashrus, we've grown tremendous all around. We'll tell you, the last industry we're still struggling like in the 20s, in those hard years, is still the meat industry. It's what we call, it's a behemoth business, let me tell you. All right. That was an inside joke. The other version, the English version, it's a cutthroat business, but all right, let's go on. I'll just answer a bunch of questions about bruises. But before I do that, I want to perhaps give a challenge to the Rabbanim here. One of the difficulties we try so hard, and maybe now you have a taste of what it takes to run a kashrus agency. It takes a lot and a lot of expertise, but it seems to stop when there's a comfort level of what could be the problem. And I'm talking about our moistus, our shulim, our camps, all across the board. Well, it's like kairachs kulei tchelis, when everybody here is from and this and that. So of course the yeshiva kitchen is okay, or the camp kitchen is okay, because Kemat everybody, right? Rabbi said it's not the case. You would be shocked. We're shocked all the time, and we tried almost. We had a very, very low success rate, but we went to the Rabbanim of the community. We'll set you up. We wrote an 85 questionnaires, 85 different questions that the Rabbanim Aleim could answer what their policy would be. We'll take your policy, you answer us what your policy is, and we'll train, free of charge, a mashgiach for your moised according to your policies, not CRC policies, your policies. And therefore everybody wins. So you come to Kiddush, the Rav had the mashgichim, or several people in the shul, Mispalim, makes no difference who, what, Shomer Shabbos, that's all. We'll train them, and you go to shul, you know that they were trained by experts, that would be, the local hashgacha, with your own policies. And almost no one took us up on the offer. It was very disheartening, and it still is. But I have to tell you, as Rabbanim, as Mispalim, this is something we should all strive for. Don't take for granted that you walk into a place and there's Svarim and Shomer Shabbos, that what's going on in the kitchen is 100% the way it should be. Okay, let me just quickly answer. There's a bunch of the bruise questions and the chicken questions. Can we show pictures? So when we were putting out our Pesach guide this year, I did put in a lot of pictures of what could be an issue, and the best way to do it is to show it around to the staff. What would you do if you see this picture? And after getting a couple of the guys throw back at me like, ew, I knew I couldn't put in a lot of those pictures, it has to be appealing. So I wasn't able to put those pictures in. However, we were able to sneak in 4 or 5, so they are in a Pesach guide. I believe it's still up on our website. Are they, Mrs. Sachs? You don't know. What?
Everything we publish is there.
Everything's still there. But the good news is, next week, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, I'm attending a big kashrus convention. Rabbi Bell will be there as well, an ACRI Conference. It's a 3-day convention, and we have one session dedicated for bruises and chickens. The experts in New York are going to be coming, and they're going to be showing all the variations. So I hope to I try to hire a professional photographer to take, very exact pictures that I can post on our website. He wanted $50 a picture, so I'm still looking for a cheaper option. But Mirza Shem, I will be able to hopefully post more of that. In the Negea, someone asked, what about if I noticed it while in the middle of eating, it was already cooked? So that's a regular shayla and halacha. I mentioned before, the isser is not the chicken. The isser now is the dam. If you could establish that there's 60 times the amount of food in the pot versus that area of dam, which almost always it is, 60 times that small area, then you should be okay, and you can eat your chicken.
It's broiled.
What?
Like you have a tray of broiled chicken,
Okay.
then where's the shishim? Because it's
Take the piece off, and you can see it.
Yeah.
If it's broad, you can see the piece.
You take the piece off, right? You can't eat that. Yeah.
If it's cooked, it's mixed. If it's
We're
broiled,
talking
you
about
take
the
the piece off.
Uruguayan meat. A lot of the Uruguayan meat, the nicker is not so good. There's a lot of,
Fat.
not fat, there's like veins and
Chutei dam.
big dam. And like when you pop it open, it's like mamish real blood in there. It's like, I mean, it looks like.
So the question is, certain cuts of meat or from certain areas they don't take out a lot of the chutei dam, that's the veins that have the blood in it. So honestly, if you, and the mechaber says as long as you cut it in chatichas and most of the dam flows out, it's enough. So that's where they're relying on. They're relying on that mechaber. You're right, a good hechsher knows is supposed to be taking all the chutei dam out. If you find them there, same thing. You shouldn't eat it. You shouldn't eat it. The dam you should take out.
No, but sometimes you see it like, you make a roast.
Yeah.
And then you see, mamish a big chut going through, I mean, you have it a lot, in the Uruguayan meat, you have it more.
You want.
So just mention the difference where the bone is broken also. If say it's a gidin or where the actual.
Oh, we're back, okay, the bone. Sorry, we just switched, I didn't know. Right, where the bone is cracked, right, if it's on the joint, if
it's
it's
on a wing, bone is broken. It's in your plate, like
if it's on the wing itself.
the wing is broken.
There are three parts of the wings, that some are better than other. I didn't bring my visual with me. At the end.
The thin bone is broken.
And you see a big bruise?
No bruise, it's cooked already. It's on your plate.
You can see if there was.
No, then it's a good chance it happened. If you don't see a big bruise happen after, you could be okay. You know, I was just in South Africa, and they had a terrible story there of where they found treifa chickens. That's another hour by itself. But I want to tell you how they found it. Rabbi Zaltzer, he's the Rosh Hashanah. So he went into the caterer. He was just walking around, and he noticed the chickens that were defrosting, that the very tip wasn't cut off. What happens is with the wings, they cut off the tip for the dam to flow out. And because he's the Rosh Hashanah man, and that day he was acting as a mashgiach, just doing a spot check, he noticed that the tips weren't cut off, and they uncovered, unfortunately, and you know, the community really was shooken up, and that's what they invited the Rabonim of ACRI to come in and to do review, and that's why I went. So that's okay then. Okay, Rebel, you wanna? Rebel, it's your turn. Wait, question.
I gave my turn to Rabbi Posner, but I'm going to give this question to him also because it's really the answer to the question. Rabbi Bell, you mentioned a quote-unquote Chassidish hechsher that you would not consider a good hechsher. How do Lubavitchers as a whole get this kind of info? There are people who will or not eat certain brands, etc., but seems to be private, and they're considered to be more Chassidish if they have a valid reason. Why is it not public knowledge? Okay. Part of it is legal fees. You get sued. Anyway, ask your local rabbi, you have local here Rabbanim, and ask him, what do you think about this, and what do you not think about that? You know, I asked beforehand whether this was being recorded. Rabbi Fishman. What
It says your name on there.
That says my name on this side, it says your name on this side.
No, the one I just handed.
Oh, this one, yeah. I think I gave my turn to Rabbi.
Okay, thank you very much, Rabbi Fishbein, Rabbi Bell, for answering questions. There are many questions which remain unanswered simply because there's so many questions and time is finite. And we hopefully will be able to continue afterwards if you want to informally ask them questions, but this can go on forever. I'd like to take a couple of minutes now just to present the kashrut recommendations which answer some of these questions. For example, what is Lubavitcher Shechita? we're aware of Rabbi Hendel's standard, where I believe according to Rabbi Hendel's standard, the person who puts the tape on the closed boxes has to also be a Lubavitcher. Is that correct?
All the hashkacha all the way down the line.
Well, including
only to Lubavitcher. The labeling has to be done, all the labeling.
okay, where we simply felt that this was an impossible standard for us to live up to here. You could do it if you're doing your own processing, but since we're not, we felt that that was part of the definition which we could not recommend to the community. If anybody wants to do that, go right ahead, but your personal level, but we couldn't recommend that to the community. How to define Lubavitcher Shechita? Now, when you see the recommendations, and as Rabbi Hertz mentioned before, we don't give hashgacha on anything ourselves. Anything which we do is gathering information, like Rabbi Bell just read a question, like how do we know about which hashgachas are good or not good? We collect information. Most of it is secondhand, sometimes it's third-hand, but we try to get multiple sources for it to find out a little bit of what's going on as much as we can, and then we try to share as much of that information as we can. So everything which we're telling you is not that we personally know that this product is good or not, but this is what we understand from people who ought to know that it is good or not. And we took the similar approach for defining Lubavitcher Shechita. We consider as Lubavitcher Shechita anything which other Lubavitcher rabbinic organizations say is Lubavitcher Shechita. So whether, right. Now, all this information is available in the booklets which we'll be giving out now, that, including that definition. So if there's an organization of Chabad Rabonim which says that this is Lubavitcher Shechita, that's good enough for us. Exactly what their policies are, how many hours of Chassidus the Shachtim learn, or whether they have to go to mikveh twice a day or not, we don't know, and we don't really feel it's possible for us to investigate that far into it. Many of the other things which were spoken about are also covered here in the book about Pas Yisrael and then Bishul Yisrael, issue of Tchila B'diavad. It's only so much you can put into a little book, but you have some guidelines there, and then there's the separate handout where we try to actually name names to the degrees that we're able to, listing specific products which you recommend, Haksherim which you recommend. So make sure to take that with you. Again, we're not setting a standard saying that you must do this, and we're not saying do not go beyond this. If you want to be more machmir, that is great. But it does help. One of the reasons why we did this is because I kept getting calls from people that so-and-so invited us over to their house for Suda Shabbos. Can I eat by them? Well, you're talking about two families in Nash. I don't know either one. I haven't spent a lifetime in either one's kitchens. I don't know exactly what's going on. So you'd say, okay, fine. Well, what should I ask them in order to know whether it meets my standards or not? I don't even know myself how to define my standards. So we put together these general guidelines that you can say, well, if you're following these rules and I'm following these rules, so we're more or less on the same level. Or I do most of it, but I think that it's okay to eat potato chips. Or whatever. So at least you have a place to start the conversation, and simply, we say the Gedolul, the Gimel Shem Bekareves, that eating together creates achdus. When everybody is afraid to walk into someone else's house or to be a guest in someone else's house, it's very hard to have achdus. If we have a means of communicating with each other, knowing where we stand, you can invite each other, and you can accommodate your guests. Oh, they only eat like this, fine, I can do this for you, because I know what you want. So that's one of the things which you hope to accomplish. This is also simply bringing everyone together a little bit more. The other handout was mentioned before also was simply a list of the Rabbanim, how to contact them, how they prefer to be contacted. One of the big frustrations is having a shayla and not being able to get hold of a rav. People experience that locally, people experience that nationally. Sometimes you call and nobody answers, you send an email. I have many unanswered emails that I sent to Rabbanim around the country about questions that I needed to know the answer to, which they should have known either because they have an area of expertise or because there's something in their area, and they just never respond to their emails. So we want to be responsive. And therefore, we give you many options of who to call, who's the best person to call for this kind of shaila versus that kind of shaila, where you get an answer. So take that with you as well, and feel free to call. Really, what's the point of knowing things if you don't have a chance to share with somebody else? So I think don't worry. Is it inconvenient time? Am I bothering you? Whatever. If you have a question, something you need to know, call your Rav, whoever your personal Rav is a place to start. Whether it's the shul that you daven in or someone you've developed a relationship with. But if that's not available, call anyone who's listed over there, and we'll be happy to either give you the answer or find out the answer. Anything else I need to mention? All right, fine.
I just want to say